Good morning, traders, and welcome to my market preview. Now, I normally do this over the weekend and I give you my outlook for the upcoming week, but I'm actually leaving in a few hours for a week-long trip. Gonna go to the beach, do some scuba diving, so I won't be able to upload any videos, but I didn't want to leave you guys hanging, so I'm doing this one early. I'll have this uploaded before Friday's opening bell. It's currently August 30th. The London session is going on, so keep that in mind as we jump into the weekly chart for the dollar index. So on the weekly, you can see we've swept the sell side and we're currently rallying. Now, Friday isn't over, so this weekly candle is still forming, but if price leaves this fair value gap intact, I'm thinking next week we can rally some into this gap. We can go even higher and rebalance this gap entirely, but I'm longer term bearish, so I don't want to see closure above half of this wick right here. So I don't want to see closure above there, but it does line up with the old low. And I'm seeing a lot of up and down movement here, so I'm viewing this as a balanced price range. So because of all these factors, I want to see price get pushed down and go for the liquidity below this low down here. Going down to the daily chart, I see some inefficiencies here where price can retrace, and it lines up well with that old low. If I take a fib from this high down to this low, you can see that OT also lines up well with those levels. So I can expect the dollar index to rally up to here. Then I want to see a turn and price dropping for these relative lows. And as a last line of defense, I don't want to see closure above the mean threshold on this daily order block. Moving on to S&P on the weekly chart. Remember, this candle is still forming because we still have Friday's trading, but I can see it has already dipped into this large inefficiency just by a little bit. And last week we did close above the mean threshold on this order block. So I will want to look for price to go for the buy side liquidity above this high. However, we saw the dollar index could potentially rally, so S&P could go back down into this inefficiency and rebalance it some more. Perhaps it does that first and then go for the buy side. It's a little bit unclear, so let's go into the daily chart. Looking at the daily chart, I see price is respecting this fair value gap. So there is potential to drop into these lower fair value gaps either today or sometime next week. We just got to see how the price action will behave today. Ideally, I would like to see these relative highs remain intact and have price go down into this first fair value gap. But today we could just get some consolidation and then we get this drop early next week. I would definitely want to keep an eye on half of this wick. I want to see that behave as resistance and have price drop down lower. Now it could go down into this second fair value gap since it is at equilibrium, but I don't want to see it traded through. If I'm bullish, ideally I want to see reaction off the first fair value gap and price bounce to quickly take the liquidity above these relative highs and go for the buy side above this old swing high. But should we trade lower and the second fair value gap fails to hold price up, then I would consider turning my attention back to these lows. Now the Nasdaq does not look as bullish as S&P. In fact, for both indices, I am long-term bearish, even though I think S&P could make a new all-time high. In the long term, I am looking for price to come down to take these equal lows. But for the time being, Nasdaq can still rally into this weekly SIBI. So far this week, we've dipped down into this imbalance and have started to bounce a bit. But like I said before, this weekly candle still has not finished forming, so things could change. However, if we close today above this imbalance, then it's a positive sign for me to aim for the weekly SIBI going into next week. Now take note, on my long-term bias, I want Nasdaq to come down and take these lows. It would be ideal if Nasdaq can come up to this weekly SIBI and rejects lower so it doesn't take out its all-time highs. However, S&P does go up and take out its all-time high and then drops because then we will have SMT divergence on the highs between both indices. But that's long term. Just for the next week, I want to see if Nasdaq can reach this weekly SIBI. Going into the daily chart, nothing changes. I'm still looking for price to come up to this weekly SIBI. We've already rebalanced this fair value gap. If we drop some more, I don't want to see the second fair value gap fail and trade it through. I think ideally, we just consolidate today within the weekly range between Monday's high and Thursday's low and close above this first fair value gap. that would be a good sign to look for higher prices going into next week. So that's it for me today. Remember, next week is non-farm payroll, so the market can't be choppy. Be extra careful. I hope you were able to get something out of this video. If you did, please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I'm taking the whole next week off and won't be trading, but I'll be back next weekend to once again give you my market preview. So until then, guys, safe trading.